Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. I have often said, and I've quoted David Coulthard's book, in which he said the Zimbabwe election, or rather acknowledged that the Zimbabwe elections are not free, fair, and credible. And yet, the opposition has consistently participated in these flawed elections. And in his admission, he does admit that the reason why they participated is out of greed. This is the quotation I've often used. The main problem we tend to have in Zimbabwe is we have got opposition supporters and ordinary Zimbabweans who have failed to define what is it exactly that the opposition is supposed to do. Unless you understand what the opposition is supposed to do, you will get it wrong again and again and again. What is the opposition supposed to do? Well, the primary purpose of the opposition in Zimbabwe was to implement the democratic reforms to stop ZANU PF rigging the elections. This is why the main opposition in Zimbabwe, the Movement for Democratic Change, was launched in 1999 to answer that very question, to address that need, that national need, the need to implement reforms, democratic changes to stop ZANU PF rigging the elections. 23 years later, they have not implemented even one token reform. Why some people fail to understand that that is at the heart of our problem, beggars belief. In the recent arguments on this program, I have argued that the opposition MDC/CCC is actually ZANU PF Team B in all but name. As Team B, they have played, their role is to play, to give the process legitimacy. Or as Coulthard puts it in this quotation that is, I'm showing you on the screen there, to give the process credibility. So that Team A wins, the process credibility.
Zimbabwe have now held their recent elections, which went well.
International monitors had to force their way through angry crowds to deliver their verdict.
My apologies for that. I intend to play the video, but was not yet ready for it. So in this particular case, the opposition participates in flawed elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, and knowing fully well that by participating, they are giving ZANU PF legitimacy. That is Team B playing, knowing fully well that Team A will win, and they want to go through the motions so that the process is given some credibility. That is what MDC has been doing. I want us to revisit the 2018 election. This is a video that was produced at the time, reporting on that very issue and the court challenge. And I would want to focus mostly on the court challenge that followed. You can go ahead now and listen to it.
They reported serious flaws in the process. It was not a level playing field. Many injured and 3 dead. The opposition says the shootings and the beatings cannot be justified. And an election in which Zimbabwe dared to dream has instead brought back its worst nightmares. There were running battles through the city centre, and the streets echoed to the sound of gunfire.
Zimbabwe, they've now held their recent elections, which went well.
You are ready now to start.
I am ready.
You may start.
Thank you, my lord. What ZEC has done is to violate the constitution, to violate the Electoral Act in a manner which has ultimately benefited the first respondent. National and Central, page 159, the report by the ZBC, it does two things. Number one, it mentions figures. Number two, it attributes those figures to a ZEC official. It says by 5:30 p.m., 105,000 people had voted in National and Central. The final figure that one gets from ZEC is that an hour and 30 minutes later, plus 370,000 people voted. Is it humanly possible? But it doesn't end there. Then there is the issue of identical polling results. There are at least 16 polling stations with identical results. Identical results for Chamisa, identical results for Mnangagwa, identical spoiled votes. And in all those places, Mnangagwa not only wins, but wins big. It's like a kid was playing with the figures. That, with respect, is not how an election is conducted.
We'll now give the opportunity to Mr. Kanengoni.
The Zimbabwe Electoral Commission cannot be taken to task to say, why is the voter turnout in my central at this particular level and not at that particular level? Voters behave the way they do. No one knows why. Maybe behavioral scientists may be able to answer the question if they study it.
Mr. Kanengoni, there's the averment that several polling stations showed identical results.
And the simple point we make is that there's no need to be theoretical about it. We have the returns. This is something that happened. We show you the returns. And we've put the returns for 2 of those polling stations here to illustrate the point.
You say it happened?
Yes.
But in his presentation, Pofu says it's actually 16 polling stations where the identical results. You heard it?
Yes, we did. Even in the affidavit, they put a bit more of the polling stations there. But we chose this to illustrate to the court. But for the rest, it did happen. It did actually occur.
We'll now go back to the applicant. Why go for speculative conclusions of manipulation?
The point that I wish to make is that this is evidence of manipulation by ZEC after the process. Now, if you go to what they call the primary data, you're going to see manipulated data. So the applicant cannot ask a court to open residue, which has already been manipulated. If you go to the residue, you will drink from a poisoned well.
This is a very interesting point. What is happening here? Let's go through it again. There were 16 polling stations in which the results of those polling stations were identical in every respect. The number of poll votes cast for Mnangagwa in polling station A were exactly the same as that claimed to be happened in polling station B. Chamisa, the same thing. All the other 9 candidates, the same thing. The number of spoiled votes exactly the same. And one common feature in all those 16 polling stations is that Mnangagwa had a commanding lead. So if you look at the two polling stations with exactly the same entries, what could possibly have happened here is that that polling station, its total was tallied up and was entered again, a duplicate entry of the same polling station. This can only be one rational way of establishing whether this is correct. Let's go to the sealed ballot boxes of those polling stations. If indeed they were duplicate, then you will find there was only one polling station in reality. The other one doesn't exist. It's just the figures were entered twice, that's all. So if you were to ask for the sealed ballot box of that duplicate, it will not exist. What is amazing here is that it is not the ZEC or the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court judge himself asked, why did you not ask to see those, to have those polling stations, the sealed boxes of those polling stations opened? And it is Chamisa's own legal representative who says, no, we don't want to drink out of that poisoned well. So you're only speculating here that there were a duplicate polling station when you could establish for sure that there was a duplicate, because the second sealed ballot box will not exist. This is absolutely surprising. Why was the opposition doing something that you say to yourself, you know, the court itself is saying to you, why didn't you ask for this? If you asked and you were told, no, you can't, we were not going to open it, then it is for the court to decide what to do about it. So you did not ask. And the rationale behind it for refusing to ask to see that duplicate. And this did not only happen with one or two polling stations where they double entry. We are told it happened in more than 16. So it's possible, if we just say there were 16, there were 8 original polling stations, and their results were entered twice. So there will be A and A dash, B and B dash, and so forth. So if you ask to open the sealed ballot boxes, you would have found there are 8 ballot boxes, polling stations with ballot boxes with those results. The other one is just a duplicate. The polling station did not even exist. And the rational thing to have done there is to ask to have those sealed ballot boxes opened. And we are told that Chamisa and company are the ones who decided that they did not want to ask those boxes to be opened. Why? Why did they decide that they didn't want the boxes to be opened? I totally agree with the judge when he said, why did you not ask for the ballot boxes to be opened? And the answer that Chamisa's legal team gave is totally inadequate. Of course, that was foolish. You can never ever justify saying, no, we don't want to open it because we already know it's manipulated data. No, those boxes do not exist. You would have established when you said, let's open them. You would have established that 8 of the ballot boxes existed with those results. But the other 8, there is the entry, but the boxes do not exist. A fictitious polling station name was given, and its results were a copy of another polling station that does exist. This is a classical case where the opposition were really making a fuss of this whole thing to appear as if they're challenging the results, when in reality, they really did not mean to challenge the result. This is a fuss for the sake of presentation. They did not want the results to be challenged. They had no intention of challenging those results. That is what it's saying here. They were only making a fuss, pretending that they were challenging it, when in reality they were not. It is a pity that we are being told one thing, and yet it's all make-believe. I'll just play that bit of the tape again.
By the ZBC. It does 2 things. Number 1, it mentions figures. Number 2, it attributes those figures to a ZEC official. It says by 5:30 p.m., 105,000 people had voted in National and Central. The final figure that one gets from ZEC is that an hour and 30 minutes later, plus 370,000 people voted. Is it humanly possible? But it doesn't end there. Then there is the issue of identical polling results. There are at least 16 polling stations with identical results. Identical results for Chamisa, identical results for Mnangagwa, identical spoilt votes. And in all those places, Mnangagwa not only wins, but wins big. It's like a kid was playing with the figures. That, with respect, is not how an election is conducted.
We'll now give the opportunity to Mr. Kanengoni.
The Zimbabwe Electoral Commission cannot be taken to task to say, why is the voter turnout in my central at this particular level and not at that particular level? Voters behave the way they do. No one knows why. Maybe behavioral scientists may be able to answer the question if they study it.
Mr. Kanengoni, there's the averment that several polling stations showed identical results.
And the simple point we make is that there's no need to be theoretical about it. We have the returns. This is something that happened. We show you the returns. And we've put the returns for 2 of those polling stations here to illustrate the point.
You say it happened?
Yes.
But in his presentation, Pofu says it's actually 16 polling stations where the identical results. You heard it?
Yes, we did. Even in the affidavit, they put a bit more of the polling stations there. But we chose this to illustrate to the court. But for the rest, it did happen. It did actually occur.
We'll now go back to the applicant. Why go for speculative conclusions of manipulation?
The point that I wish to make is that this is evidence of manipulation by ZEC after the process. Now, If you go to what they call the primary data, you're going to see manipulated data. So the applicant cannot ask a court to open residue, which has already been manipulated. If you go to the residue, you will drink from a poisoned well. When you look at the figures, let's look at those that have been admitted by ZEC. Let's look at the.
That is absolutely amazing. It doesn't matter how many times one listens to that. You cannot help but say to yourself, that does not make any sense at all. You have got here a situation where even the judge is saying, why are you going for speculative that the results were manipulated? Let's find it conclusive. That is the reason why the law says that after an election, in case there is a challenge to the results, when you have done all your counting, you put all the materials that relate to that electoral process back into the ballot boxes, and it is sealed and signed and signed by all those who were involved in that electoral process. And that box should not be opened except if you're ordered by the court. That is the reason why it's sealed. And for somebody to now say, oh, I don't want to open that because there is manipulated data in it. Well, that is the reason why we sealed it. If all the people who were involved in that electoral process witnessed the opening of it and they confirmed the results, then we have established that that result is correct, the correct result. Why are you so protective that you don't want it to be opened? Particularly when you are the one who's saying the process has been corrupted. And yet you are the one insisting that you don't want the truth to come out. Triple C, whether we like it or not, has been ZANU PF Team B in all but name. If we were to go back to this whole election to 2018, Chamisa was asked, why are you participating in these elections with not even one token democratic reform implemented? And he argued that he has MDC has come up with stringent measures, he said, to stop ZANU PF rigging the election. That was his argument. ZANU PF was not going to rig the 2018 election because MDC Alliance, which he was leading, was the presidential candidate of, has come up with stringent measures to stop ZANU PF rigging the elections. It turned out, of course, that he had not done so. There was no verified voters roll. Some of the polling stations that year, 2018, it turned out MDC did not even deploy its own election agencies there. There was no one to witness some of those the election process. And some of these 16 that we found Mnangagwa had done so well, if people had dug a bit deeper, they would have found that MDC Alliance did not even have election agencies at those polling stations. Why? And yet he claimed that he had election agents. It was only 2022 that he finally admitted that some of the polling stations he did have election agents. And the process was repeated again 2023. People said we cannot go through another election process without any meaningful reforms. But it was none other than Chamisa and company who insisted that we can go through it because they have got measures to stop ZANU PF rigging the elections. They claimed Triple C was going to win big because, among other things, Chamisa had plugged all the ZANU PF vote rigging loopholes. The people believed him. And they participated in numbers. In 2023, I think Chamisa and company decided they were not going to have another farce challenging the election results. And so they did not challenge the election result that year. They claimed the elections were rigged, but they did not even bother to challenge them. Indeed, how do you keep on challenging an election result when you yourself was the one who was claiming that you had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes? So were you lying when you said that? The point here is MDC, Triple C have been participating in these flawed elections, knowing fully well that they are flawed, knowing fully well that by participating, they're giving ZANU PF legitimacy. Why have they been doing it? Simple. In this quotation I put on the screen, David Coulter explains why they were insisting. And he clearly says it. The 2013 electoral process was so flawed, so illegal, that the only logical step was to withdraw, which would have compelled SADC to hold ZANU PF to account. But such was the distrust between MDCT and MDCN, those are the two main factions of the opposition, that neither could withdraw for fear the other would remain in the election, winning the seats. That was the only reason why they keep on participating. They knew ZANU PF was offering a few seats, gravy train seats, to entice the opposition to participate. Indeed, that was the same reason why the MDC had failed to implement even one democratic reform during the 2008 to 2013 GNU grid. The tragedy for Zimbabwe is that the people themselves have been very slow to realize that. And so they've believed some of the blatant lies by MDC to justify why they keep on participating in these flawed elections. The claims that we have developed strategies of winning rigged elections, which is, of course, nonsense. If you accept that ZANU PF has got the right to rig the elections, then there's no limit to what ZANU PF rigging can do. What is the point of you challenging in a constitutional court that ZANU PF has rigged the elections when you yourself keep claiming that you have got stringent measures to stop ZANU PF rigging the elections? Are you trying to claim that your stringent measures failed? You claim that you have plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. What's the point of challenging the result? Are you going to show the world then that your measures to plug the vote rigging loopholes did not work? The last year's election should have been an eye-opener to every Zimbabwean out there who has been paying attention. SADC, the AU, they had their own election observer teams for last year's elections. And both the regional body and the continental body, selection observer team, condemned last year's election as flawed and illegal. And they made those announcements soon after the election was done. Nelson Chamisa and company had the opportunity to digest those reports. And still they chose to ignore those reports and to take up the gravity seats that they'd won in the flawed elections. What that did was it gave the process legitimacy. That is what matters here. Their claim that, oh, we are to accept those seats because those are liberated zones is nonsensical. The election process is judged on the process. You cannot judge an election process that where there is not even a verified voters roll as being free, fair, and credible. What Chamisa and company were trying to do is saying in those urban centers where the opposition did well, the election process was free, fair, and credible. That's nonsense. The same voters roll was used in all constituencies. If ZEC failed to produce a verified voters roll, they failed to produce a verified voters roll, not only in the rural areas, but in the urban areas too. There was no verified voters roll in Zimbabwe for the 2023 elections. And yet the opposition still insisted in participating. As I said before, the opposition were participating to give the process credibility, to give ZANU PF legitimacy. They were just Team B. They had to play along, knowing fully well that at the end of the day, the result must be Team A must win at all costs. And they must make sure that Team A gets legitimacy. So they've got to pretend that this is a contestation, a serious contest, when in reality, they'll just play acting. History will judge what happened in 2018, rightly. There is no doubt that video is historic evidence. I'm glad that the proceeding of the courts on that occasion have been recorded for posterity. People will listen to it and make their own conclusion. I can rest assure you, they are not going to be fooled into believing that there was any rational reason why Chamisa and company insisted that they did not want to have a look at the original data, other than that they did not want to embarrass Team B, Team A. They were Team B. They realized that if they were to open that, that will open a whole can of worms. Because if you insist in opening the sealed ballot boxes and you only find that there were actually 8, not 16. So where did these other figures come from? Clearly, they were just double entries. Any further investigation on those 8, you may find this was some of the 400 or so polling stations in which Chamisa, although he insisted that he had election agencies at all the polling stations, did not even have election agencies. In last year's election, he had the funding. He got the money to pay the election agencies for all the polling stations. And yet, he failed to deploy all the polling stations. So to deploy all the election agencies. This does not make any sense, particularly for somebody who has said, I've plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. This was surely one clear case where you're saying, this is common sense. Why are you not deploying election agencies there? We should have had a situation here where an audit would have shown there were so X number of polling stations, and the opposition had election agencies at all those polling stations. Just as much as we have got a voters' roll, and we should have a verified copy of the voters' roll. You accept going into an election without something as basic as a verified voters' roll. You go through an election process and you fail to even deploy election agencies. You find the results that show that there were double entries of the same result from one polling station, the result being repeated. And the solution is very clear. Let's go to the original data. Let's open the sealed ballot boxes. And you're the one who said, no, we don't want to open it. Why? I think history will show that Nelson Chamisa and company have been playing a double game. They have been pretending to be a genuine opposition, when in reality, they are ZANU PF Team B, playing to pretend that they are genuine opposition to give the process credibility. Let ZANU PF win and give the process credibility. My main message to the people of Zimbabwe is we have got to wake up. Zimbabwe is in a serious economic and political mess. And one of the main reasons for it is that the last 23 years, we have failed to get competent opposition leaders who would implement the democratic reforms to ensure that ZANU PF does not rig elections. As long as ZANU PF is able to rig elections, what follows afterwards, they are not accountable. And they know they'll get away with it. And they've got away with it repeatedly. At least we should have the common sense to accept what is happening here. Thank you very much for listening, and have a good night.